Really what the TCPA regulates in the context of marketing is going to be two main things. Number one is using what's called an automatic telephone dialing system to call people, and number two is calling folks for marketing purposes on the National Do Not Call Registry. That's the two main operations that the TCPA regulates, and basically the fundamental rule is that you can't do those things. You can't call people with an auto dialer, and you can't call people on the National Do Not Call Registry without their consent. Penalties, for those of you who don't know, are fairly steep. It's a per call or per text message penalty of anywhere, it starts at $500 a call or text and goes all the way up to $1,500 for what's called a willful violation, okay? So you just kind of do the math there. If you're talking about a case, an individual case where you've called someone 10 times and there's something wrong with your consents and you didn't have consent, that's $5,000 bare minimum right there for a TCPA violation. This TRACED Act really didn't have too many problems getting through Congress and onto the president's desk. It was signed into law on January 3rd. It doesn't change the paradigm in terms of TCPA regulations or compliance. What it does is it keeps the TCPA as the centerpiece federal regulation of robocalling, and it adds this appendage with a hammer on it to allow the government greater ability to deter, stop, and enforce TCPA violations, okay? So it does it in three main ways. The first is it mandates the FCC to go to the carriers and say, hey, carriers, you all need to implement call authentication technology. So for the major carriers, there's a framework called STIR/SHAKEN that they will start implementing under this law in theory, and then smaller carriers, it kind of depends on how that's all going to roll out in terms of what type of call authentication technology they deploy. You've also got a lot more government reporting. Congress wants to know what's going on with respect to TCPA violations and enforcement. So not only is it making the FCC report to them fairly regularly now, but it also commissioned an intergovernmental working group headed up by the Attorney General on how to best prosecute robocall violations. Now, last but not least is enhanced penalties, right? So you thought the $500 to $1,500 penalty was draconian. Under TRACED, it'll authorize the FCC to pursue forfeiture penalties that could be as high as $20,000 per violation, per call or text, right? And it also clears some hurdles to the FCC's ability to hammer people with these enforcement actions by taking away some prior requirements that they had to cite you, then there was a hearing, then you had to commit the violation again, and then you could get fined. It's cleared the way so that all they need to do is cite you. Yes, you have the opportunity to respond, but those procedural roadblocks or hurdles that used to exist, they've cleared some of those away to, in theory, make it easier for the FCC to go around and enforce. Obviously, the public outcry over the robocalling problem is intensifying. Congressional response is intensifying. Enforcement is going to continue to intensify. In my opinion, so will private claims as well. As long as this law is on the books, this is just going to be the landscape, at least for the near term.